welcome to The Scoop. I'm Farah.
And I'm Nicole.
And this is, where are you?
I am Marie.
This is Marie Johnson, and welcome to The Scoop and our goofy, fun podcast that we love to do every month. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Marie, and why you're here and what's your passion?
Well, I have been working with Sonnenberg for 20 years now, from the beginning of Sonnenberg. Have done almost every job imaginable here, and I love this. I love Sonnenberg. I love the kids that we work with. I love the passion that we have here. I also, in my personal life, I have a son who's on the spectrum. He's now 20, oh my goodness, he's 22 years old now. And he went through an ABA program here at Sonnenberg, of course. I homeschooled him and my older son for the majority of their school career. They both attended public school in high school, but up until then, I homeschooled both of them. So I am here today to talk about homeschooling.
That's awesome. We've been through a lot for sure. A lot of changes, still growth and learning. And when preparing for this podcast, we were looking at some of the things that we wrote up. When did we write that stuff up? Would you say? Was that how many years ago? 6, 7?
Maybe even like 10 years back. It's been a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we were just looking at kind of what we had wrote up originally to help support homeschooling, and just, it actually helped to mold some of the direction of our program, because we were like, okay, how do we make, an all-day program, right, Nicole? How do we make an all-day program where parents can drop off, leave, come back, and not worry about the school component when they weren't ready to enter school? Would you guys say that's accurate?
Yeah.
So we were looking back through, which is always fun for us, because we go, oh yeah, that's why we did that, or oh, we need to update that because we did this, or we don't. There's a variety of reasons, but I think what's important is to look back, see how far you've come, and what we need to keep adjusting, or pivot, or add, or take out. And I think that was helpful to kind of, I guess, think about what we really wanted to say in this podcast and what was important at the present, which, again, if we redo this in a few years, we'll probably say something different. Because that's what I love about us too, is we just keep growing, and growing as in, like, what do we need? Not growing as in necessarily clients or staff, but growing as in what is needed at this moment or this next upcoming year. So Marie has, done pretty much a little bit of everything at different points. I know you've helped do timesheets, you've helped do pretty much everything, right?
Yep.
So this was a big area, especially in your time when you were homeschooling too, because you were in the muck of it, and like, this is what we need to do, or these are the rules. So, or this is what you need to do, parents. It's it's okay. It's not super difficult. It will help you get what you need for your kid. Tell me if this is accurate, because what I have seen, and Nicole, what have you seen with families? I typically see like a clinician, a doctor, or a teacher, an educator saying, this is what you need to do. And it's like one path.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Like, go to school.
Yeah. Like you get, like, your kid is
Yeah.
5 or 4 or 6, or I know 6 it's legally, but 4 or 5, and now 3 really, in some 2s. Put your kid in school and get him onto that pathway.
Yep.
And that's right.
Mhm.
That's pretty much what's said. And that's just not accurate. There's so many.
Yep. And it's not always what's best.
Yes. So that's what we really want to get into, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Is some options with us, and options in general, and that it's not so scary. I would say it's actually a much easier,
than you ever would have imagined.
Yes. I mean, I think they make it sound so difficult because it's not the traditional path that they would do 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, really, but 20 years ago for sure. The education system is pretty much the same that it was back in the 60s. It's pretty much exactly the same. So it just hasn't evolved and come the way that it needs to, and it's always about money, of course. Almost everything's about money. So anyway, I hope that gives a little bit of background. Do you have anything to add to that at all? Or Marie, do you have anything to add to that, just kind of intro that you
I don't
wanted to
think
say?
so.
No? Okay. Okay, so I think where we could start is, let's see. So do you want to go, I think sometimes it's helped to start with how you started and how you ran into this and how you went like, what do I do? And kind of explain that piece of just because they're 6 legally, this is what you can do, and kind of going into that path of maybe what you did, and kind of then we can go into what Sonnenberg has kind of offered and done, and we can kind of talk about that. Are you guys okay with that?
Yeah,
Okay.
works.
All right, Maria, go ahead and start with your path and kind of what led to that.
Okay. Well, it worked out really well in my situation. I had a lot of friends where they had or were homeschooling their kids when my kids became about that school aged time in their life, and I homeschooled my older son, so I had at least a little bit of experience with that before, needing to make that decision for my younger son who's on the spectrum. But when I got to that point of, he got the diagnosis when he was just under 2. So we started therapy with him, the ABA therapy, really early, which was nice. But then when he got closer and closer to that school aged, he just was not ready. He wasn't communicating the way that he should have been. He was not able to sit, and I don't think he would have learned in that typical environment. But I was told, just like everybody else, the best thing to do is put him in school. They know how to handle him. They know how to educate him. They'll know so much better than you. So I did. I put him into kindergarten, and he stayed in the public school until he was in 3rd grade. During that time, they were very, very reluctant, very resistant to trying anything different than what they had planned to do with him. One of his biggest deficits was he could not read. Pretty sure, never got formally diagnosed, but pretty sure he has dyslexia. And so he had a really hard time with his letters, his numbers. So all of that academic stuff he was really struggling with. I did research on different reading programs, but the school didn't want to try anything. They just kept saying, don't worry, we're going to work with him with this program that we found works best, but he didn't make any progress. So in 3rd grade, I finally decided I was done. I had even tried, got him an iPad so that he could do talk to text, and they would not incorporate that into his school day, even though he could at that time communicate and he could dictate what he wanted written, and then it would write him for him. They wouldn't even do that. They didn't include him in school projects where the kids would write up stories and then read them out loud to the class. There were just so many things that he just didn't get to take a part in because they wanted to do it their way. So I decided that I was going to pull him out. We were going to try some different things. I was able to try different reading programs. The first 2 I tried weren't super successful, but then the last one that I tried, within a summer, he went from not being able to even identify all of his letters to reading. So it was pretty amazing being able to then pull him out, try the different things with him, find what worked for him, and then get him reading. And then I kept him out of the public school until he hit 9th grade, where then I felt that I was it. Couldn't quite do it with working full time, and being able to give him all of the resources, because at that time he was doing really well socially, and they obviously have bigger programs where there's more social opportunities than I was going to be able to offer him. But at that point, I felt comfortable with him being in the public school because of where he was academically from the years of homeschooling that we did.
Wow, that's awesome. I've to step back a second. What did they do in 3rd grade for communication? Did they do anything, or what was, because you said they weren't doing the talk to text, they weren't doing any of the things that you had suggested, or, things that we would work on in ABA. So what did they do?
I don't even remember what program it was, but they had a program that the district decided that was going to be their reading program for anyone with special needs. And that was the only reading program that they were going to do. He was at that time vocally communicating, but it was just that writing and reading that he was not able to do.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Just to kind of relate to what other families might be experiencing. So that's why I think it's helpful just to kind of, I'm just curious if they're still, I'm assuming that that's still going on depending on what districts you're in, right?
Yeah.
They pick a path and this is what you're doing, and if it doesn't work, well, we're just gonna keep doing it and doing it and doing it until.
Yeah, and from my experience, the teachers don't have a lot of ability to try different things. They just have to stick to the programs that the school has or that they're a part of.
Okay, okay, there's a couple of different ways we could go with this. So that's a great background. So let's go into third grade. It could be earlier, you know, well, let me ask you this. Would you have done it earlier if you would have known what you know now?
Absolutely.
So what would you have
Absolutely.
done differently, knowing what you know now?
What do you mean? Sorry.
So like, and you took him out in third grade, would you have just started him out and just kept him going at home?
Yeah, I thought, I mean, it was a lot of advice that I was given, but I also thought that there was no way that with him having special needs and having autism, that I would be able to give him what the school would be able to give him, that they had all the resources, they had all the time, that it was going to be so much better. If I had known how easy it would have been to homeschool him, even having autism, I definitely would have done it from the beginning. And I think he would have grown further and sooner than he did.
Yeah, okay, that's good to know. I mean, we always talk about in ABA, the early intervention, as soon as we can. That's what the research continues to show, and so that aligns with what you're saying as well. So go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, even in that social aspect, a lot of times, whether it's with my kids or professionally, I hear it all the time, teachers saying, well, the school is the best place for them to be because there's all these social opportunities that you don't have at home, and we can work with them socially. And he did so much better socially in the ABA than before we got to kindergarten than he did in school. He made a lot more progress socially in the ABA than he ever did in public school.
Well, and to piggyback that, I think Nicole, you probably can say more about this with the Littles program and coming in, but that's why we started that and have it at the clinic, because we have these circles and these rooms and we match, right, buddies and peers, to work on those things, because and I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more to that, but you have to be able to do it one-on-one, really like teach some of those skills in the early programming that we have. And then you have opportunity to generalize right away and then actually make true friendships too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we heavily focus on meeting the individual where they're at and then developing like groups or social interactions based on those areas so that they're working on individual goals. However, they're in a group space with peers that can align with some of that. Yeah, and the generalization across like different environments and people and things is all what we like develop in the clinic. So,
and I remember when we first started this program, it was, you know, we had younger peers or just beginning school age peers, and I remember knowing that this would generalize quicker, that it would generalize as we're working on it, quite frankly, and that we would have kids come in and say like, oh, I'm feeling more comfortable because that kid does what I do. But I was still so pleasantly surprised when it would happen, because it's just amazing. It's one thing to talk about it. It's another to see it and live it and watch it unfold. And I remember specifically when we first started, there was a kid, I obviously can't say his name, but I remember he would do like this and he would do some rocking and things like that. And he walked in, and I remember him stopping and looking across the room. This is like what in the beginning, like I think it was summer camp is when we started, right? Wasn't it like the beginning?
yeah, we did like a summer camp and we did like one like larger like social group day kind of thing too.
And I remember this kid walking in and going, he does what I do. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh, okay. You know, and then he was like excited about it. And I know the research states all sorts of stuff about that. But when you see it and then you see a kid like relax and connect, and like, I just remember thinking like, yep, we made this the right decision. We're on the right path and here we go, you know? So it almost makes me choke up because I just remember that feeling so much, because he was one of many that you saw it. And if they couldn't even talk about it, you just saw it. you just saw like, and then you just saw like peers turn into like, almost like a peer turn into like, I'm gonna help this kid, or I just connect with this other kid that you just didn't expect that connection to be. And you're like, whoa, I didn't see that one coming. That's pretty cool, So anyway, it's just, yeah, so I just wanted to say that to piggyback of what you're saying, Marie, is that's what we do. That's why we see that progress and why we see it happen. And it just, again, that generalization where we noticed in home, where you hear, some of the downfalls of ABA is they're by themselves at a table in the corner of the room and they don't generalize anything. They do it for Susie or Johnny or whatever, right? And so that doesn't happen because it's right? It's generalizing as we're doing it.
Yeah, because as we're doing it in different areas, or we're doing it with different people, and all of our schedules and how we staff all aligns with the generalization phases, so.
Yeah, so anyway, just wanted to piggyback that, because I would agree that's the biggest thing we hear, why the clinic setting was set up. Okay, awesome. So what would you say then, which way do you want to go, Marie? Do you want to talk about how you did that then, or what was it scary to do that, or how did you make it legal to homeschool, or whatever you want to call it? Because that's the big thing too, is I can't do that. That's so much work.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I had friends that were homeschooling their kids, and their kids obviously had skills that my son didn't have, but I was lucky enough where I could kind of work with them and was shown how easy homeschool could be, because it doesn't have to look like school. They don't have to sit in a chair at a table for 8 hours a day and just work on worksheets and work on, science experiments or things that have them just confined to the table. That you can go outside and you can do homeschool. You can go to a fire station and do homeschool. You can go to the grocery store and incorporate learning and homeschooling into it. That there's so many different areas that you can incorporate it into, that it became less difficult. When I first pulled him out and started, I tried to do sitting at the table, and that was not successful for him. He needed to be up and moving around. He needed to have more of that like real life stimulation. He needed to have items to play with rather than paper and pencil activities. He needed to see the things working. So being able to pull him away from the table with advice from other people, pull him away from the table, do more things in the environment. So instead of talking about, what a flower looks like, we'd go outside and we'd look at flowers. It was a lot easier then to do the homeschool with him, because it was setting him up for success, but it was also taking the things that he did really well with and incorporating that into the learning, rather than trying to get him to learn at what I thought what school was supposed to look like.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so how did you collaborate with the ABA team, and what did that look like? As far as, I was kind of going through our notes, and just like the academics versus what is appropriate for ABA, and how you make those two kind of marry together. Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, well, when he was in school, it was very different. We didn't have the insurance funding, the ABA, like we do now. So it does look a little bit different than when we did it together. There was a little bit more of an overlap between his ABA and school, where now they do have to be very separate, but it is still very easy to keep those separate, but still have the collaboration and the help from the ABA team. So now what we've done with some of our families now is the homeschooling, the academic part of it has to be very separate from ABA, but your ABA team can help with behavior. So let's say they're having some of those, tantrums during some of the work, or they're having a hard time motivating their son or daughter on how to do the homeschooling. Your ABA team can help with that behavioral component of it. It's just the academic part that they can't, but it could be trying to figure out what skills they have. So let's say within the ABA part of their life, they're working on things like imitation and learning how to follow simple demands. That can be incorporated into the homeschool, because that's learning language, that's learning communication. It could even, some of those ADL skills can be, rolled into health. And so your ABA team can help with, we found this works really well here. or even some of the caregiver goals that the ABA team comes up with, those can help with homeschooling too. So you can be working on, those ABA goals while you're doing homeschooling at the same time.
That's awesome. How have you seen that we've separated but still aligned so we help? So, because obviously the goal is to get kids school ready, or at least, right? I mean, that's the goal. So what have you seen, and what have we done to help align those two, but still keep them separate and compliant?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the individual. We like all of our skills can, like Marie said, can kind of align with some of like the academic components. Like we can't teach the actual like academic piece, but we can work on the behavioral components. We can work on the communication and understanding communication, understanding those directions. Attending is a huge one. All the daily living, like, yeah, that applies. We teach daily living more as like a independence type thing, and as it relates to health and safety. And that can be incorporated too, like being able to follow like a visual schedule in the home. Really anything that's like incorporated into the clinic can also transition to the caregivers, like Marie said, and become goals that they also incorporate into that homeschooling model. So I really think more than people realize can be incorporated. And separating it just comes down to making sure that we're not educators, so we're not teaching mathematics and we're not teaching reading, as you would think of how to teach those.
Right. But attending too, so you can read, attending, so you can learn math.
Yeah.
And so we've used some of those components as attending, because you don't just attend, just sit there to attend, right? You either gotta do something you're attending to.
All of the individuals that we service don't naturally do those things.
Right.
So it is teaching like how to manipulate the items that they come in contact with, how to engage with their environment. And so those are all important pieces to being able to do academics in the first place.
Right. And Marie, that would also kind of show why your son started in one area, you pulled them out, and then the ABA team, yourself, and everybody kind of worked together for those attending skills. So then he could go sit at a table and do whatever it is that you're asking him to do. And the social part, and the, because of the attending piece.
Yeah.
So, and all the other things that we just, talked about. So that makes sense. That makes sense why we want to start young, and we want to start with those things, because then that naturally is going to continue. So you can learn academics and all of those things. So I think that's the key piece right there. And that's why ABA is so effective. And as we work on those pieces of all the stuff that we just discussed. So so that's awesome. Do you have anything else to add on to that?
I was gonna say that cooperation between homeschool and ABA, it works, I think helps so much get the kids ready for that next environment, whether that next environment is going to school or that next environment is doing, getting a job, whatever that next environment is. Yes, homeschooling is working on the academics, but in homeschool, you can teach those academics, but then teach also all of those other skills that they're going to need, where in school, they're so focused on the academics that if your child doesn't, let's say math and reading aren't their strength. Let's say their strengths are, I guess those skills that we want them to have for independent living and for jobs. If that's more of their strength, they're not going to get that preparation in school, and then they're going to go through school and then not be prepared afterward. Or let's say school is the next environment, you can still take all of those attending skills, all of those prerequisites, make sure that they have a good solid foundation, which then will help them in school later on. Where one of the struggles that I had with my son in school was they wanted to keep moving him academically with his classmates. And then all those prerequisites that his classmates just picked up on, he never had. So if you don't have the prerequisites, you're not going to learn how to do the higher up stuff. So if he didn't know how to add and subtract, he's never going to know how to manage his own money. But with homeschool, I was able to keep him in that math and subtraction and addition long enough for him to actually learn it, where now he could, maybe not, do some higher level math, but he's able to balance a checkbook, or he's able to understand finances, where if I had kept him in school and moved him along and didn't have the help of the ABA and kind of working those two together, there's so many of those prerequisite skills that he wouldn't have had, and then he wouldn't be as independent as he is now.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and that reminds me of you, like in all the stuff that you and the older kids and the adults, what is needed? What's really needed in life, because everything our kids learn in school, you don't use. We all know that. We've all been through school. We all know that there's a very large portion you don't use. It depends on what route you're going. And there is this, how do you take care of yourself? I mean, I'm going through it right now with my 15 and 16-year-olds, and what's important. Like, what are you really going to use, and what do you really need to know? So do you have anything to add with that? Because I think that's so important, that we think we have to stay on a certain track. And, I think they say everything you need to know in math is learned by 6th or 7th grade, but that when you're independent for the average person. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, a lot of it you don't really use. It depends what pathway that you're on too. And so being able to kind of gauge like those needs and that pathway is like the beauty of it, so that you can stay with whatever that subject is or that skill is for a long enough time until it meets mastery, because there's a lot that you can kind of tweeze out that you don't really need, that individual doesn't need. It's the beauty of ABA too, is that we have a lot of teaching ways to teach and ways to modify that is successful, and we do kind of skill build in small pieces for the larger skill at hand. And so being able to do that kind of gives us that lens of like, okay, here's some of our building blocks to get to the overall picture, and how we're going to do that with different prompts and different techniques that we know.
That's so true. I mean, we break everything down to build it back up to where it needs to be. I mean, like if you're going to be an accountant, of course, then that's going to be a pathway. And many of our clients are great with numbers, and they're actually way above others that with numbers, and they can do amazing things, right? Or engineering. And then there's others that read really well, and they go down that pathway. Sometimes it's the comprehension piece, so we have to look at that too. And then, like you said, Marie, it's neither. It's a whole different area. So finding out where that fits in their life, and what route to go. But obviously making them the most successful in what they do and happy, and that's really like our end goal, right?
Yeah, and I'm thinking like using their strengths too to teach other areas is often what we do. Like what motivates a learner to want to learn, and then using those motivators to like continue on skills that may be more challenging that they will need.
Well, it's everybody. That's all of us.
It is everyone, actually, if you look at it.
It's everybody. Like, why do we do this podcast? I mean, why do we do this? Why don't we do that? Why do we excel in one area and not the other? So it's just, I think that's really true. And we really apply that to all of us, to be quite honest, but especially the clients that we work with, because it's, there's other things that we're having to modify, or other strengths, or the abilities are a little bit different. So yeah, I think that's really, well, it's what I love about all this. You have to be so like the creativity piece of that. And the human like connection with our clients, and that, like you said, their strengths, like, oh, I have to really think about like, how can I apply that to this area that they're gonna need, but they don't really care about this area, so that's kind of fun too. So okay, so that's awesome. What else, Marie, can we talk about in regards to just homeschooling in general, and things that parents or your experiences have limited, or people are afraid? Can you think of anything else that really stands out?
I think the biggest thing that I've seen, barriers that I thought I saw, and then a lot of parents see when they even think about homeschooling, is the time. How am I going to find enough time to do this? what kind of curriculum, or again, does it need to look like school? Do they need to be sitting at a table for 8 hours a day? Just having that mindset of there's no way that I can do this. There's no way that my son or daughter can do this. And then I think materials is the other thing. I think those are the biggest struggles. It's getting wrapping your head around the fact that it doesn't need to be sitting at a table. How am I going to find the time for it? And what am I going to use are probably the biggest barriers that I saw and that I see with other parents that I work with.
So what do you have to present to, I'll just say the state, I don't know how else to explain that piece, but that's the thing that I don't, like you just said, all the things that you just presented, what is the requirement and like what is important to track or keep, or how do you do that?
Okay, so this is the information that I have is for the state of Wisconsin. Every state's a little bit different. With Wisconsin, all of this information, I'm assuming this would be with other states too. You just go onto the DPI website for that particular state to find out what the differences are. But for the state of Wisconsin, every parent is required to provide 875 hours of school per year. So if you do that just in a 9-month period, so like our typical schools are like September to June, if you do it just in a 9-month period, that's only 22 hours per week. And if you spread it out throughout the entire year, which you can absolutely do, then it's only about 17 hours a week. So 17 hours a week doesn't seem as intimidating as 875 hours for the year. You can do, 4 or 5 hours on a Saturday, 4 or 5 hours on a Sunday, and then still, let's say they're in a clinic setting or they're still getting ABA, you can still do that ABA for, 7 hours during the day and still just do a little bit of homeschooling afterwards and still get those 17 hours in if you do it year round, which I think for most parents, it's the easiest to do it year round because you're doing all of the things that if you're giving them, helping them with showers and baths, if you're reading books to them at night, all of those things would count as homeschool. If you're doing it anyway year round, you might as well do the year round school, which means just a little bit less of a commitment each week.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think also, like if I didn't know all of the things that we've been doing over the years, I would be like, okay, so I've got to stay home for those school hours. I just do, like, it doesn't have, that's not how it needs to be. So yeah, if you're with them all day on a Saturday, then there's a big chunk right there, or if, like you said, at night when you come home from work.
I mean, trust me, these parents are already doing this.
Right.
Like I've seen so many parents in home and they are already doing this day in, day out. It's like having them request for what they want for meal times, having them put their dish in the sink, having them do their whole nightly routine. They're already doing it. That's what I really want parents to know is that to have some ease with that scheduling component and getting those hours in it. Yeah.
Well, and all the stuff like the visuals, so that they're improving, and pointing through those or whatever it is that you're working on. I mean, potty training, everything. I mean, all communication. I mean, we're working on that constantly, so you're doing over that, really.
I think so, yeah.
I think, I mean, that's a full-time job.
Right. Parenting is basically homeschooling.
Yeah.
I mean, if you take the academic part of it, like the actual academics out of it, parenting is homeschooling.
Yeah, I think that's a line. That's one of our lines. Parenting is homeschooling.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and then, what's so cool is that there's a requirement, an ABA with parents and involvement and working together and goals. And that's what you guys were both talking about too at various parts. So there you go. You take a lot of those things, you pull them out, and you're working on them anyway. So, and then you're adding in whatever you can. Like you said, Marie, reading a book, or I mean, I know with my kids from the very beginning, we worked on letters, numbers, words, colors. All parents do. We're all working on that. That's all of it, and it's at the pace of the child and in collaboration with the ABA team. So there you go. So anyway, we just want to to say this, and so it's really not that scary and it's already happening. You have to think differently than what the traditional, like school is telling you needs to happen. And
Yeah.
and we have done this before. I don't have the data on me from before, but we've done where there was learning opportunities in school and an 8-hour day, and how much learning opportunity that child, for example, actually got, and the learning opportunity they got in ABA and a full program, for example. And I mean, we're talking on 1 or 2 hands that child got in the school environment all day long.
Yeah.
Because they're just sitting there and they're just trying to keep them safe is typically what ends up happening. I mean, I'm doing a blanket statement, it's not everybody, so, you know, and it was quite eye-opening.
Yeah.
Would you guys
Well,
agree?
yeah, I was gonna say, if you think about it in a classroom, you've got, 30 kids, and the teacher, yes, is gonna make a statement, okay, A plus B equals C. They're teaching this one thing. Then they have to individually ask or answer questions that any of the kids have. If any of the kids need help, they're gonna go and individually help those kids. So all of that time that they're helping other kids, the one student isn't getting any educational teaching, where if it's one-to-one in the homeschool or one-to-one in the ABA, they have those constant learning opportunities.
And what I've seen too is when kids are in school, what comes home? All the work from the day, and the parents have to sit down and do with them at night for hours and hours and hours. So they've been sitting there all day and they have picked up very little, if nothing, depending on the kid. And then it comes home. So
And then I don't know how to do it.
well, that's my favorite. But I'm like, don't know. New math? What?
Yeah. I'm like, just carry the one. And she's like, that's not how you do it, Mom. And I'm like,
I'm done. I don't know what to do. Yeah. But it's true. So like, to put that into perspective too, is that, you're doing it anyway, and then they've been at school all day anyway. So like, why don't we meet them where they're at?
Yeah.
And start there and then build on that. Because you're gonna do it anyway. And the goal is different for every kid, but at the end, like, we want them to be successful. We want them to be with other kids. We want just happy. We want them to be happy and successful. And what else would you say about that? Like, that pretty much summarizes it, right? Independent as they can be.
Yeah.
And really that's what we're doing. So that sounds like, Marie, what you did, and then also what you would have done differently based off of your experience, and really what we hear over and over again. I've been doing that for 25 years. The same thing over, and again, now and 25 years ago, we're hearing the exact same thing. So I think that's, I hope that's helpful, because I think, when you just said too, you're doing it anyway, you do it all day, like, it's so true. And I didn't think about it exactly like that.
And my daughter, who is in a behavioral ed program, gets more homework than my other children. Can you believe that?
Wow.
That was a thought that came across. And I'm really doing this.
It's true though.
It is. Well, because she's refusing all day, so.
Well, there you go. And then you're having to figure it out yourself to get it done.
Yeah.
And I remember that too, a lot, I was in the schools a lot. That was a big passion of Marie and myself. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense for a kid to go to school all day. And it becomes very negative, because now you're taking everything in the school day and sending it home. And now I'm having to figure it out. So I'm having to break it down anyway and figure it out, or that parent, right?
Yeah.
Because it happened with my kid too. Same, I have some things going on. So I'm like, this just isn't working. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. So anyway, so those are really good, I think, points to that. There was what other things did we talk about, Marie, or what other things did you want to?
There's a few other requirements that for the homeschool, just so that everybody knows exactly what's required. Throughout the school year, you have to work on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 subjects. So you have to have something in all 7 subjects. It's reading, language arts, math, social studies, science, and health. So you have to cover those areas to consider it homeschooling. But just like we were talking about before, you can find so many other things to do in those subjects. Like health can be while you guys are cooking a meal together, talking about what well, we're putting tomatoes in here because tomatoes are a fruit. We're putting beans in here because beans are a vegetable. So you're still talking about that subject within something that you're already doing at home. Math could be something like, you guys are going to the store, and if something that they're working on is counting, you're counting vegetables as you're putting them in the cart or putting them in the bag, and having them do part of it. If, let's say, your kiddo has a lot of sensory dysfunction and you're working on, different tolerance programs. Let's say you're going outside and you're working on I've had kids that I've worked with, but even like touching grass is something that's really hard to do. Well, we're going to go outside and we're going to play with the grass while we're talking about the grass. We're talking about how green it is. So, I mean, you're incorporating reading into that. You're incorporating math. If you, count some of the grass, or you know, let's say we pick up a handful and we throw it in the air, we can talk about why it floats down the way that it does. So you can still incorporate all of those subjects into a lot of different things that they're interested in. You can still absolutely do some of the paper and pencil. There's also a ton of apps that you can use if your kiddo just loves, playing on the iPad or playing on the computer. There are tons of apps and that type of technology that you can use to do the learning as well. But as long as you're getting those 875 hours in per year, you're working on all 7 of those subjects throughout the school year. It doesn't even have to be every day. You don't have to work on math every day, but you have to work on it throughout the school year. And as long as there is some type of sequential order to it, so that you're progressively making it more and more difficult so that they can learn more as they get to it, then that's all the requirements are for homeschooling. So even fulfilling all the requirements isn't that hard.
Yeah.
I have a question. Do you have to turn like anything into the state, or like what's like the documentation like?
There's actually, the state of Wisconsin does not require any documentation. I always recommend it because the school system or the school district they can ask for records, and they can ask what it is if they feel that the child is not getting an adequate education, but there's not any like regulatory body that's set up to check in or make sure that you're following all the requirements. But I would still recommend keeping a record of how many hours you do each day and some of the things that you're doing, just so that if anybody were to come and ask, you can say, these are the things that we're working on, just to prove that you're doing the homeschooling. But there's no records that you have to keep. Every year you do have to go online and fill out, I don't remember what it's called. It's a P1 1206 form, basically stating that you're going to homeschool.
Okay.
But that's the only paperwork that you're required to do each year.
One thing that just popped into my head about that is, okay, so you homeschool forever, let's say until they're, what kind of what do you do about diplomas? Like if jobs ask for diplomas and want that proof, like what happens with that? Do you know?
There's not a diploma that you can get from homeschooling. That's something that you used to be able to do years ago, but now you can't anymore. But a lot of parents will make up their own diploma. And then what you would do is the child can go to an educational facility, whether it's like a technical school or even a college. And basically they would there's a different type of transcript that they would have to fill out. There's a lot more information on that on the DPI website.
Okay.
About how to do a diploma for your child if you homeschool the whole time. Now, if you let's say they're an ABA and they're really succeeding in ABA and they're doing really well, and you decide, okay, to make sure that they are getting the best benefit out of all of the resources that we have for them, you want to homeschool them so that they can stay in ABA longer. And let's say they do that for 5 or 6 years, and then everybody agrees that school is now the best place for them, and then they go to school, then they would get that diploma anyway. The only reason you would have to make up your own diploma is if they do all of basically their graduating year. If they're homeschooled their graduating year, then at that point you would have to kind of create your own diploma. But even if, let's say they are homeschooled all the way through high school up until their senior year, and they go to a school their senior year, they would still get a diploma. You would just have to, I think, provide some of what you guys worked on before they were in the public school.
Oh, okay, well, I just thought of that now. I'm like, what do you do?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't even, yeah, so that's good information.
When they like transition, so like let's say they're homeschooled for a few years and then they transition into the public school. Now, I guess that doesn't go by credits in like the younger years, but when you had your son start high school, where did they place him like academically? Or how did that look?
Well, what the school does is when they come from homeschool, they would do the same thing that they would have like if he had come in at kindergarten, is they do that evaluation. They have to evaluate to see where he is academically, where he, because he had special needs, they had to do the evaluation to see if they fit under any school diagnoses. So they would do all of that evaluation beforehand. So definitely if you're thinking about transitioning from homeschool to the public school or private school, you want to let them know. I mean, you could even let them know during the summer. I would recommend letting them know during the school year beforehand, so that they can start all those evaluations so that they're ready in September when school starts. But they would do evaluations to figure out where they are academically. So that's what they did with Devin. They tested him in all the different areas, and then they knew where to place him when he started school.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then that's how the IEP is created
Mhm.
and how you support
Yeah.
individual. Okay.
And this is something I've heard from parents too, is when they've talked to their school district about pulling their children out of public school to homeschool, they make it sound very scary. Well, the IEP is going to lapse, and then if they ever come back into the school, they're going to come back without any supports, and it's not a very good thing to do. They are required to do the evaluations beforehand and to set up an IEP before they're in school. So they actually don't have a lapse, and that IEP, as we found before, that IEP can last for 3 years.
Mhm.
And then at the end of that 3 years, then they're required to do those evaluations over again. So even if you pull them out and put them back in later on, they're still going to have the benefit of the IEP. The school district is required to do that.
That's good to say that, because
Yeah.
that is something that is said a lot,
Mhm.
about that, to kind of keep kids in school and say how difficult that's gonna be. They have to do it anyway.
Yeah.
So regardless of what you decide to do or where your placement is. And as a parent, I mean, it's your choice. It's your
Yeah.
choice about what you want to do with your child.
Yeah. And
Um,
you can start or end homeschool at any time during the year. It doesn't have to be just at the beginning of the year. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to get through a school year before you can do homeschool. You can start and stop that at any time.
Awesome. That's great. Is there anything you want to add about Sonnenberg and anything that we do to support, what a supervisor can do to support, what we can do at the beginning when you first meeting us? What would your recommendation be, Marie?
Well, I would definitely touch base with your team to see what their recommendation is. Yes, parents are the best advocate and for their kids, and parents know their kids best, but sometimes it's nice to have that outside professional opinion of where do you think they would benefit from going to school? Do you think they'd benefit from more ABA, and kind of working together to determine what the best placement is for them? And then if you decide to homeschool, or even if you decided not to, I mean, I think Sonnenberg has done a great job with meeting parents where they are, meeting kids where they are, and helping with a lot of those different transitions, where even if it's not something that like if my ABA team had said, I think that public school is going to be the best thing for him, and I decided to pull him out and do homeschooling, at that point, it wasn't going to be, well, I'm sorry, we're not going to do anything with you because you decided not to do. I mean, there are some things that, clinically may have to be done or may have to be decided, but we can still work with parents, we can still work with the kids. And if you decide to do that homeschooling, Sonnenberg has been amazing with, coming up with caregiver goals that help with the homeschooling, or even just sitting down and, okay, we're going to do an observation in home. You do your homeschooling. We're going to figure out different interventions that might help with the behavioral aspect of it. Or you're homeschooling and you're doing this and you're running into this barrier. As long as it's not that academic piece, the ABA team can help with, figuring out different interventions, figuring out different modifications, or even just different, ways of doing things that they've found work really well for the kiddos in the clinic.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to piggyback on top of that too is, like you said, if a parent decides I'm going to do this and it's not the whole clinical recommendation of your team, then we'll have to prioritize, and we'll have to say, this is, what is the priority, right? Based off on that partnership. So it's definitely, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. It's definitely possible, we're gonna still give you our clinical recommendation, what we
Mhm.
would love to see, but we're
Right.
obviously gonna work partnership. Do you have
Yeah.
anything to add to that piece? Or is that pretty
That
much
sounds
summarize
good.
it? Okay. So yeah, I think that's really important. And, you know, the thing that I think we see too is apprehension at first because of traditional school, you know, pathways. And then as trust and connection and, you know, kind of develops over time, then we see, I would say, more of, oh, okay, this isn't that scary. Wow, look at the progress. Wow, my kid actually is, look at all the, like, look what's opening up, you know, and then we see a little bit more of that, and that's understandable. I
Yeah.
mean, trust and connection is everything.
Yeah, we've had parents that have been very apprehensive about doing the homeschooling, have done the homeschooling, and then when their kiddo's ready to graduate from ABA, they're like, nope, I'm still gonna do homeschooling.
Yeah, no. Yeah, that's so
This is just because they had those school experiences and then they had the homeschooling experience and they realize how much more beneficial that homeschooling is.
Yeah, that's a good point, for sure. Yeah, it's really cool. It's really cool. And you know, it's so ironic how many times our kids do so well and they lose their IEPs, or we hear, oh, we can't provide these services anymore because they're doing so well, you know, like, oh my, you know, it's like that. Come on, you know, but that we hear that a lot too. So, so yeah, it's best to partner. It's best to work together. We have to work together too in order for, you know, that consistency, and that generalization. And we need to know you're the expert, like Marie said, you're the expert on your child. We need that back and forth in order for this to be as successful as we know it can be. So, that's why we think this topic is so important, because it only helps benefit the individual that's, you know, seeking out treatment. And we can definitely help with that. And we want to, we love that partnership. We love that communication. So I think that's really helpful. Is there anything else, Marie or Nicole, with, homeschooling, or just what we can do at Sonnenberg to help with that? Is there any resources, Marie, that you have found that have been helpful?
Definitely. I mean, Google online is amazing for a lot of that, and then going to the DPI website. But yeah, there's a ton of different, already set up curriculums. If, your kiddo, that academic part is really, that's a good, spot for them. Or there's a lot of different books that you can get if you just want to kind of piece it all together. But definitely a lot of resources. There's homeschooling support groups and homeschooling groups that you can be a part of that can help with it. And we at Sonnenberg, we have a couple parents that do homeschool. So, I mean, networking is really helpful too. We're finding out, especially having that resource of somebody else who homeschools a child with autism is definitely helpful, because it is a little different. You do have to kind of tweak things a little bit differently, which, I mean, as parents, we know that already.
Yeah.
But it definitely helps having, other people who had that perspective to be able to talk to and bounce ideas off of. And then using the ABA team, definitely.
For sure. I think the one thing is apps. There's a lot of great apps to generalize or to motivate or to, I mean, look at how many kids do online now. They
Yeah.
literally go on a computer for a couple hours a day or whatever it is, and that's their schooling. So it just goes to show you how many different ways there are to teach. And what counts. I won't say counts, but that's kind of what I think parents are most nervous about, right? Is that piece of that. So there's just so many options for each individual. So anything else, guys? I think we've covered a lot. I learned some stuff too that I always do though. I'm always like, yeah. Well, thank you, you guys, and thank you, Marie, for being our guest. And just really, it's just so informative, and I'm excited for this to air and for us to use this as a tool for our parents too. So thank you, everybody, for joining the scoop, and we will see you next time. Bye.